Today I wanted to talk a little bit about the three things. The first one is give you a bit of an update of the latest happening in the markets for vegetables, and I've got some data that goes up to April this year, so it's pretty up to date. And the second thing I want to talk about is the export market mapping tool that we've developed with AusVeg, and the third thing I want to talk about is the progress of the export strategy. The first thing is to talk about how the market's performing, and if you just look at a historical perspective of Australia's exports, it's been very volatile, and we had a sort of a cavern and a valley in the middle in about 2009 where a whole lot of things crept up on us, and one of them was the Aussie dollar got to parity, and we also had the millennium drought and a whole lot of other factors. Previously we had good trade in various products, but over the time it's been very volatile. It's been very much about market access, about the availability of the markets, about competitiveness of pricing and so forth, heavily driven by the Aussie dollar. And we were dominated by hard vegetables, and we were very much a trading culture. But that's really changed. In the last 4 years we've had a sustained growth, and it's been fueled by the favourable Aussie dollar, but also by a change in attitude by the industry and a focus by some key players to get into strategic export marketing to become long-term players. And I think there's very strong signs that the AusVeg export strategy is starting to bite. And we've particularly seen some growth in green vegetables. So if you look at performance overall, it's grown in value by 4.8% in the last 12 months. But it's grown, the long-term compound average rate of growth is about 11%, so it's been quite sustained. It's down a little bit this year, and part of that's heavily driven by a bit of a reduction in potatoes, not carrots so much, but onions and also asparagus into Japan. But it really is pretty strong. The volume's fairly flat, and that's because largely because we've lost a lot of business in onions in Europe because we are no longer price competitive. The Europeans are storing their onions longer, so that seasonal window's dried up, and also New Zealand are more price competitive. The Middle East is the strongest in the market as a block. But Southeast Asia is also very strong. So we've always done good business in Singapore, Malaysia and Hong Kong, lesser extent in Thailand and in Indonesia. But we're well on track to reach the target of 314 million, which is a target set for the 2020 strategy. It has been sort of derailed a bit, but provided the Aussie dollar stays where it is, and all indications are that it will, and if anything, the main sort of the smart people in the blue suits in the banks are telling us it's going to go down, if anything. So that looks pretty favourable. If you look at by product value, the big thing that we've seen is the growth in green vegetables. So carrots have always been the star performer, and we've always been very competitive in carrots. We're price competitive. We have a better product. We grow, our quality's better, our taste better, and also we've got an integrity thing, so they trust our product. So carrots have always been the star performer, but green vegetables have really shown some boost. Particularly lettuce, celery, brassica, etc. So if you look at these categories here, so the green vegetables are a very small part of the total share of exports, but they're growing phenomenally. So celery, 51% growth, 5-year growth. So it's been pretty spectacular. And that's largely driven by some key exporters who have decided to be serious exporters, take a strategic approach, take a long-term approach, develop products and so forth. We're seeing the similar sort of thing in capsicum, broccoli, lettuce. So lettuce has had good growth. Carrots have also, pretty strong growth as well. Part of the reason for the growth in green vegetables is that the market's we sort of lost a lot of market share in green vegetables in the Asian region to China, but increasingly people are becoming distrustful of the integrity of Chinese product, and they're particularly sensitive in green vegetables because It's associated with, food safety a lot more than other vegetables that are cooked. So particularly around the salad vegetables and stuff like that. So we're seeing some particular gains, particularly in places like Singapore, where it's a very price-sensitive market, but there's a big enough share of the market that want to buy a product they can trust, that's got food safety. And one of the things about Australia is that we've got very good food safety integrity standards. So we've got a reputation for that. So, the years that have been spent with quarantine and restrictions and all that, which have been a cost to the industry, are actually paying off for us. And that's really been translated into some trust and then some market share. As I said, if you look at the breakdown, that's dominated by 4 categories: carrots, asparagus, potatoes, onions. Asparagus have shown strong growth, particularly in Japan, but lost a bit last year. So if you look at share by country, Singapore has become a very strong market for us. As I said, Singapore is a maturing market. I think it's the most affluent country in the world. And it's particularly, it's the most price-sensitive market in the world. So Singapore is literally on the crossroads of the trading world, and they can buy from anywhere. It's no market access issues at all. It's totally free to anyone, and it's been heavily driven over. So most of that trade's been driven by importers out of the market. But more and more, Australian exporters are building direct relationships with supermarkets or with providores and so forth into high-end food service, and that's really starting to kick in for us. There's been a growth in the upper-end supermarket chain and upper-end food service chains in Singapore, and they want product they can trust. The Middle East is still strong, heavily driven by carrots, but other things coming in there as well. Japan has been a strong market for it, but it's down this year largely because of asparagus, and we built some good trade in asparagus, but in the last year we've lost that, and the market for the imports into Japan have dried up. And we don't know why, so it's not so much we've lost market share, it's just that the market's shrunk. And I think that, we don't know where that's going to go, but there's been a concerted effort to develop that market, and it's had some great success, but it's a matter of monitoring the situation to see where that goes. Malaysia's down a bit. That's a highly volatile market. Hong Kong, pretty strong market for the same reasons as Singapore. South Korea is heavily driven by processing potatoes, so we put a lot of crisping potatoes into South Korea, and they go in. We have it's a heavily restricted market with strong tariffs, but we've got a window of opportunity where we've got 6 weeks of tariff-free when the Americans can't supply. So the crispers want product straight out off the harvester. They don't want the storage that impacts on the quality, and they want fresh products. And the Americans' season stretches a bit, so we can get in there for about 6 weeks and doing very good trade. And there's all opportunities to build that trade because they like our product. But this year it's down a bit because the Americans had a bigger supply situation. Market share by destination, I've already talked about this, but it's led by the Middle East. The Middle East is a polarised market. It's got most of the Middle Eastern countries have got a very wealthy upper class and a big sort of tail of imported workers or immigrant workers that tend to work in oil camps, etc. And so there's a food servicing. Now that's very price sensitive, but we're doing quite well in the higher end supermarkets there. Market access is a bit of a barrier in Northern Asia, so there's strong opportunities in Northern Asia for us, particularly in China, Japan, Korea, and Taiwan. And things are improving, but market access is the big barrier there. In terms of the export growth drivers, one of the big drivers is the favourable macroeconomics. So we've got there's strong affluence in Asia, strong economic prosperity. And as that happens, there's more trading into the modern trade, the supermarkets and the high-end supermarkets and online and high-end food service, and less in wet markets. So Australia generally is not competitive in wet markets, but we can be competitive in the modern trade. And that's growing strongly, The wet markets are shrinking, the supermarkets are growing, online's growing, and so forth. So that's really driving it. They've talked about the modern trade, the export culture. So in the last, historically, Australia's been an opportunistic exporter. The traders in the market will send an email saying, "I want to give us a quote," and we respond to that. But more and more, there's companies strategically in carrots and particularly green vegetables that are looking at long-term, building relationships, applying the principles of marketing and export marketing for long-term programs, and that's really starting to kick in. Strategic investment by these category leaders. Also the AusVeg Hort strategy. I'll talk about that very briefly in about a few minutes, but the signs that that's kicking in, the inbound trade missions are starting to build some relationships. The work that Michael Coote's doing is really starting to bite, and that will evolve over the next 3 or 4 years. The exchange rate's good, as I said, and improving market access into North Asian markets. So that's still a challenge for us, but improving. We've also got a location advantage into Asia particularly, and with the tourist trade, we're getting a big freight connectivity improvement because most of our green veg particularly are going out of here in the cargo holds of passenger planes, and with more tourists there's more and more cargo capacity. So Emirates are doing something like 160 flights a week, Singapore Airlines the same, with wide body jets with plenty of capacity. So, and the freight rates are favourable out of Australia and good availability, particularly out of Melbourne and Sydney. More problematic out of Brisbane and Adelaide, but certainly out of Melbourne and Sydney. So that's been a big factor. And also we've got strong relationships. So Australia's starting to build relationships, particularly through the inbound missions, and we've had a long history of trading. They trust us. They trust Australia to do what they say they're going to do. They shake hands on a deal. They know it's going to happen. So that's starting to really kick for us as well. So, but the thing is that the growing affluence is the key thing, and that's where Australia's competitive advantage is. We're not going to be winning on price. We've got to win on other factors, and we've got to really look at the higher end factors. So it's in the higher end supermarkets. This is ones in Hong Kong, where you'll see an apple for $20 for one apple. We're not in that league in vegetables, but certainly we're getting a lot of presence in there. But also high end food service. So we're getting the high end hotels, the 5- and 6-star hotels, and you're getting the quick serve restaurants like Subway, etc., that want our lettuce because they trust it. The same with the hamburger chains and stuff like that. So that's where we need to be, and that's where our competitive advantage lies. I think, the heartening thing for me is that we're on a transformation from being opportunistic traders to program marketers, and you can see the twigs of spring, on the leaves, the new buds. It's really starting to show and starting to kick in for us. Opportunistic trading is about reactive to inquiries, highly volatile, deal by deal. It's price negotiation, price driven, tends to be agent driven. A lot of it's going out of the markets. A lot of agents in the market will consolidate, put a container, an air container or a sea container out every day or whatever. There's no commitment, no loyalty. So that's where we've been at. And I'm not saying that's wrong, and that's always going to happen, but it's not reliable and it's not sustainable. You can't rely on it. And the key message that I think we need to get across today, and I think other speakers will reinforce it, is we can't use exports as a dumping ground. We have to be a long-term trader. So program marketing is about a long-term commitment. So it's about being, the issue is that you're sitting there as an exporter and you're getting $3 for your lettuce in Singapore, and the Brisbane market's gone up to $6. You're losing $3. But if you start thinking that way, then you lose it. So you have to be prepared to have a long-term view about it, and it'll pay off on average over the long term. So you need long-term supply agreements with end users, if possible, at least providors or distributors to end users. Customised product, understanding what they want, what varieties they want, what their trim level is, what do they want packaging, what pack size, etc. a supply and ongoing program, investment in marketing, doing some in-store work or whatever the market needs, an agreed pricing formula. Usually it's not a fixed price, but it's a price that varies with the market, but one where you're not taking the market's highs and lows, but you're getting somewhere in the middle with some sort of protection and some sharing of the risk and the volatility, and mutual obligation and loyalty, and requires critical mass and continuity. So you really need to have critical mass. So you can't really build a program if you've got asparagus for 6 weeks. You have to have a situation where you can supply for at least 30 weeks of the year, and that probably means you either have to have production in a few different states or collaboration with people. So what we're seeing is a lot of collaboration between growers in different states or growers with different products so they can put together a program. But the other reason why you need critical mass is that the freight, because you pay a lot more for freight if you're getting a sub-container load. If you're putting a few boxes on a pallet or whatever, you'll pay a lot more. So if you can book freight, and a lot of the successful guys will have an AV container going out every night to Singapore every night, and they're filling that because they've got the volume, and quite often that's through collaboration. In most categories, we can't not competitive on price. The exceptions there are carrots. We are a highly efficient carrot producer, but anything where there's a lot of labour, particularly green vegetables where it's hand planting, it's hand weeding, it's hand picking, it's hand packing, that's very price competitive, very price heavy. But things like potatoes, onions, carrots, we can be competitive in most areas. So, but we can't sort of rely on that. So we have to really look at what's a value proposition around non-price factors. And that could be the variety, growing varieties that people like. And you can't assume that a variety of celery that Woolworths like is going to be desired by people in Asia. Some people like white celery, some people like green celery, some people like long celery, some people like short celery, some people like it packaged, some people don't. So, some people want to buy the piece, some people want to buy the bunch. So we have to really look at how we can do that to the level that meets our customer requirements. Quality standards, packaging, branding and provenance. Provenance is really important. Supply chain efficiency. So the way the market's going is towards pack. So I've got a few pack shots here. And I'm not saying this is where we're at the moment, but we really need to be starting to think this way. So this is where the market's going, towards these higher end packaging and so forth, with very high pricing. It's going to take a 5-year journey and product development, all those sorts of things, and developing the market. But we have to start that journey. So this is, as I said, it's really about the packaging, the value proposition, the branding. It's very hard to brand, non-packed product. So just some examples, but the point is that this is what the market wants. This is where a competitive advantage is. So we have to start to develop the skill base to be able to, and the capabilities to be able to start to get on this journey. Market access is an issue, and this is an example of a market access map that's in the mapping report. There's a lot of red ink in there, particularly in North Asia, but it's improving. So, the Middle East, the Middle Eastern markets are free, subject to phytosanitary certification. The Asian markets, Southeast Asian markets, are open, no tariff, no phyto, anything even. Most of them, some of them in Malaysia, but Thailand's got some issues. Indonesia's got some issues, but generally it's improving. We're making some progress there, and it's a long and protracted progress, but we've got some new access into South Korea with broccoli, cauliflower, lettuce, spinach, celery and leek. Carrots into Taiwan from Queensland and WA. Indonesia, we've got access for seed potato from South Australia and Victoria. So some slow progress, but it's worth going. The pipeline in negotiation is this. So, I won't go into the detail of it, but basically, there's a queue for the negotiation process. It has to go through a trade advisory panel first, through the HIA system, the Horde Innovation System. They develop priorities, and then that goes to the department, who then negotiate that. And so there's quite a good pipeline there, but particularly in the North Asian region. So, as I said, that's showing some strong growth for us, subject to market access. Just very briefly want to talk about the mapping tool. So we developed the export marketing strategy, and as a foundation for that, we developed a mapping tool for vegetables. And AusVeg have got a 4-year funding agreement to renew this, and it's in its second iteration. So it covers 15 prospective markets and 18 categories. So it's a monster report. It's about 400 pages. And for that reason, it's interactive. It's designed to go on an iPad. We can say carrots, Bahrain, or celery, Hong Kong, and it'll tell you all that. With this, we sort of use a tool called Market Potential Index, and it's a tool that sorts markets by their potential. It's quite a complex algorithm. Our company's been using it for about 20 years across a range of products, and we've perfected it for veg. We think it's got pretty sensitive now to it, and so we use that to sort out what are the top 10 markets or whatever. We've got detailed dashboards by country and by category. So as I said, we've got in the country categories, we've got how much we export there, who our competitors are, what the price points are, what the market access is, what the freight connectivity is, etc. And then by category, we've got similar information about what our share is, who our competitors are, what our price points are. So we've got pricing data that shows who our competitors are, where we're at, and so forth. So it's a pretty comprehensive bit of work. It's a collaboration between McKinna et al. And Fresh Intelligence. Wayne Prowse is our collaborating partner. He's got, I think, the best data in the business. So we work together very closely on that to develop that. It's in its second year, and we are flexible within the limits of the data to change the format of that. So if any of you are using it and you'd like to see some other information, if you put it to us through AusVeg, we'll see whether we can do that, but we're more than willing. So it's evolved from last year, and it'll evolve again this year. We've added more countries. We added Taiwan this year, which wasn't in last year. So this is the latest version of it. As I said, it's a monster report, so you have to get on the internet. You have to get it on the iPad to make it worthwhile. So it's got sidebars and all that sort of stuff. This is the Market Potential Index tool. I won't go into it in any depth, but it basically measures the potential based on the propensity to buy, market access, price competitiveness, a whole lot of different things. As I said, it's a pretty accurate tool. We're pretty happy with it. You can get access to it. There's a summary report at this address, and I think levy payers can get the full report. We're happy to talk to anyone who wants to use it, and we're happy to get feedback from anyone who would like to have some suggestions about how we can improve it. Now I quickly want to talk about the export strategy because I'm running out of time. So we've developed an export strategy. It's now in its second year. I won't go into the depth of it, but basically it's got 7 platforms, and then sitting below each of these are programs, so how you actually make this. So the platforms are what we have to do. Then there's programs that tell you how we're going to do it. Then there's action plans that give some guidance as to who's going to do it, who's going to pay for it, what the timelines are, what the KPIs are. The first thing's about creating an export culture. So, when we did the research 2 years ago, there wasn't a lot of people in the vegetable industry weren't as advanced as other industries in terms of their interest in exporting. So we're building an export culture through building awareness, through seminars like this, etc. Driving product differentiation, as I said, trying to find products that are going to work in these markets with at a premium price level. We need to look at the branding. We need to look at branding at an Australian level, at a category level, and at a product level. We need to work that through. Collaboration in the supply chain, as I said, to get the critical mass and volume and continuity, we need to have collaborations. So we're looking at how we can build collaborations between businesses and to put together a long-term supply chain. Looking at value-adding opportunities for which there are substantial. And the last one's about market intelligence, and this mapping tool is a part of that market intelligence. Again, this is available on the AusVeg website, and it's too detailed to go into, so I won't even try to. Critical factors for sustainable success. You need a long-term commitment. If you're in for the short term, forget it. You might win, but you probably won't. It won't be a long-term business commitment, right? Long-term business success. You need scale and critical mass. And unless you're very big with growing properties across Australia, you probably need to have collaboration with other growers and with other parts of the supply chain. Target marketing, deciding which countries you want to go to, and which channel within market. Do you want to go food service? Do you want to go online? Do you want to go high-end supermarket? Which channel to market? Understanding your customers. What do they want? What's their preferences, size, colour, variety, etc., etc. Differentiating the value proposition to support premium pricing. We're not going to win on price. The Chinese are a third of the price in most of the products. So we've got to have something better than that. Efficient supply chains. It's all about freight, and also efficiency is not just about cost. It's about getting the product there in good condition. And high levels of customer service. So, these are sort of proven things. The experience is, and the numbers are showing that these things are really, they're not theoretical. They are working. They are biting. So, the final point I'd like to make is that a viable, sustainable export industry is a good way to improve industry profitability. So, even though you mightn't be the slightest bit interested in exporting, the more we export, the more power it gives us to negotiate in the domestic market. And, for example, some work that's been done by APEL that shows that if they took 30,000 tonnes of apples, which is 10% of apples, put them on the export market, would increase prices by $1 a kilo. And that's big money. So if we could find some ways to do that. And the same things happen in meat where, Coles and Woolworths no longer set the price of meat. It's buyers in Beijing and Shanghai. And that's where we need to get to. So, the industry's, building that discipline. As I said, I think the strategy's working. I think we've worked on many strategies for many products over many years, and I think that the way this is being managed by AusVeg, and I'm not just saying this because they're sponsoring this thing, is the best we've seen. Michael Coote's doing a fantastic job, and he needs to be given as much support as he can. So, thank you very much.